from God himself that this is the real deal team that's going to win it all.
Absolutely. The Commanders with Daniels are the way we would hope the Bears would have been. And, the funny thing is the NFC Central was, of course, 0-3 in the playoffs, and the Bears actually played those three teams better first go around than any of the playoff teams that lost, that beat them. So, I mean, I don't know. It's crazy. We expected more from our outstanding division. So maybe we do have a chance to be successful in that division next year with our new coach, who's going to be the savior that's going to lead us to the promised land.
I got the list of all the names on there too. We'll get to that in the bottom of the hour. But I just think that, there was no way to contain Jayden Daniels. That he was just on fire last night. And it makes me wonder now, is this going to be the hot team in January that represents the NFC? Or is the winner of today's game between the Eagles and the Rams going to be who ends up going to the Super Bowl?
There's a few things to break down from this game in general. I mean, you could talk about how Jayden Daniels was able to answer Aaron Glenn's constant blitz, how he was able to make big play after big play. And it's not like Detroit wasn't in this game. And you can't make an excuse. The year the Miami Dolphins went to that frigid cold Arrowhead and lost to Kansas City, their defense also had over 11 people on the IR. You're seeing how it impacted Detroit in this game, not having a fully healthy roster defense. And that was a good defense. But to Marver's point, it is true. When every Bears fan was kind of imagining how this season was going to go, they did picture the Washington Commanders. And it's interesting how the crossroads happened where the Commanders and Bears had that game in which one team went one direction and one team went the other. And both teams played in interesting divisions where Washington had to compete with Philadelphia. The Giants were the bottom dwellers, and Dallas, before Dak got hurt, was an interesting offense. CeeDee Lamb, before he got hurt, was an interesting offense. There is Mike McCarthy's connection to them themselves. Say what you will about Mike McCarthy. I think he is the DiGiorno's Pizza, the Little Caesars Pizza of this hiring search, but he will get you 7, 8, 9 wins. So it's not like the NFC North and the NFC East don't have some comps too. The difference is right now we're seeing the Philadelphia Eagles possibly heading to the NFC Championship game. It will be an NFC East, potentially NFC Championship matchup, and it just as easily could have been the same way in the NFC North. Now, what really fascinates me is how the Bears' connection to the Washington Commanders specifically, let's keep going down this rabbit hole. They interviewed Dan Quinn. They interviewed Cliff Kingsbury.
Yep.
They could have interviewed they didn't even talk to Jayden Daniels. They knew they were going to drop Caleb. What I find fascinating from most beat reporters, who I believe the Chicago Bears have the best beats in all of the NFL, people on social media on Saturday going so hard in the paint saying, did you know the Bears could have drafted Jayden? We all knew come that scouting time, that the combine, the draft, Jayden was a hell of a quarterback. So was Bo Nix. So was Drake May. The number one consensus overall pick was Caleb Williams. And I don't think it's fair now to Caleb. It's fair now to Bo. It's fair now to May. It's fair now to Penix to put to the mean dumb because of how great Jayden is. This may be Jayden's best season in the NFL. How much better can it get? He could be great. He can be an all-timer. We don't know. But
he could be another RG3.
Where it's just one great. And look, they can win the whole thing, boys. Like, that's the thing. Anybody listen to us here, they can win the whole thing. This is all about perspective. This is all about year to year. And I think we should be enjoying what we're seeing from that young quarterback who seems unfazed, who was getting laughed out of, Arizona State before he went to LSU, a Heisman winner, who's also bucking the trend of a Heisman Trophy winner not having success in the NFL. We're seeing that right now. I think this is a great story for the NFL. I think it was a great game. I think it was a great matchup. Then you talk about the Chiefs and the Texans. This has been my entire thesis on the Kansas City Chiefs, why I will continue to pick them. They know how to get through a regular season just healthy enough, just enough wins, just enough of the stats to get the home field advantage, where you got to play at a frigid Kansas City. How many good teams are the Kansas City Chiefs going to have to play before they go to the Super Bowl? One. Because guess what the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens had to do? Play good teams and then each other. So we are seeing the war of attrition. We're seeing what a great quarterback, and we're seeing what timely defense does for NFL teams in this position. And if you're a team that is on the outside looking in, so inside here, if you're a Bears fan, if you're a Raiders fan, or if you're a team that just got eliminated from the playoffs, ask yourself, the Sam Darnold effect, the Jared Goff effect. There are so many things that we could have dissected and that we could take going into the draft, into training camp next year. Heck, that we could be talking about for the next few weeks, because we saw some great performances, and I think we saw some things come to fruition and some Cinderella moments become pumpkins going into these divisional rounds. And we want to hear from you. Make sure you guys are giving us a call at 773-763-9278. We're on YouTube live at the Sports Cubicle. Send us an email over at sportscubicle@gmail.com. If you missed any one of the segments, go visit us at the SoundCloud. Go to soundcloud.com/WCPT820/tracks. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. It's Paul Chivari. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's the amazing Devin Tingle here on the Sports Cubicle, WCPT 820 and Heartland Signal. We have a few calls if we want to go to line 2. Dev?
It's got to be Dave. And Dave, I'm sorry. Before you start, I'm sorry that your Detroit Lions didn't make it to where they needed to. That was a rough loss. I want your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, on that one, it's broken hearted. It was 30 years ago since I saw him last time in a playoff there, and it happened. The Washington Redskins beat us in the championship game in '91, and I did want them to play Washington. I didn't realize how good this Daniels guy is. He was wow. I mean, just I don't know how many incomplete passes he had. I mean, he had just about every time he was tossing them, and then he threw a few bombs there, and and we had the errors, with the interceptions in the end zone, a couple of interceptions in the end zone and the fumble, and you ain't gonna win that way. It's a shame, because I truly thought this was going to be the year, But hats off to Washington. Hats off to them.
Yeah,
they played us.
Daniels completed like 70% of his passes, but I think the turnovers by Detroit was probably one of the largest factors in the game that they were able to not catch up. But with all of this, you've seen Detroit gets into these shootouts with teams. With the Bills, just even over the years, I think ever since Dan Campbell's been there, there's been these high scoring wins. I think of that one Bears game that kind of went back and forth a few years ago where the Bears had it won. I think Detroit wins it at the end. But then you look at a guy like Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator, and he's like a hot commodity in the coaching search. And it makes you wonder when teams are dropping 30, 40 points on you in games, even if you're winning, that's still, how does that reflect well on your defense?
Well, in all fairness, let's not forget he was working with guys that were third and fourth stringers back there by that time.
Amik Robertson getting injured early in the game didn't help them either. Yep.
No, and then that number, I can't think of his name, number 40 came in, and he only had like one appearance before that, and he made some key tackles. And I think for what he had left, what did they have, 18 or out key players? And I think he did a damn good job as a defensive coach. And that's so. And I'm proud as hell. They had 15-2, nothing to sneeze at. And Minnesota was 14-3. That's amazing. We had two from the north with some double-digit wins like that, and they're both one and done. But,
so to you though, when you look at this year's team and last year's team, is the window still open in 2025 and 2026 for them to try and get back to that point? And when you look at these two teams, was last year's team really truly the better team because they made it further, or do you think, aside from the injuries, this was going to be the squad that probably had the best opportunity to make it to a Super Bowl?
I thought it would have been this year, but it happened when Hutchinson broke his leg. That's when it kind of the wheel started coming off. I don't think they got many sacks after that, even when they made the deal so they could get Zadarius Smith. Because then you had him go down, and then you had the I'm trying to think of the other guy opposite of Hutchinson, who he broke his leg against, and then he got hurt. You didn't get many sacks no more, and they were a big threat. I think if Hutchinson would have been healthy the whole thing, I think that would have made a huge change. think about it when Anzalone came back, like last week or so. How much of he was like the ever-ready battery. He kind of sparks them up, you know. But yeah, the better team won last night. That's all I hate. I hate to say it, you know, but the better team won. I was going to say some real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
It'd be hockey. I read earlier in the week that there was a bill to award congressional gold medals to the 1980 Miracle on Ice Olympic hockey team. It got reintroduced into the House of Representatives. And the USA Hockey Executive Director, Pat Kelleher, said he encourages fans to contact their congressional representatives to express their support for the bill's passage. February marks the 45th anniversary of the Americans beating the heavily favored Soviet Union on the way to the gold medal on home ice in Lake Placid back there in 1980. And even the NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said that he enthusiastically supports this legislation. So myself, I was a young soldier at the time, and we were so thrilled when that happened. You know, we beat the vaunted, hated Russians. You know, and remember, that was in the height of the Cold War yet. So that was huge. Because you remember how the Russians were? It was men. I mean, they were, some of them almost 30 years old playing against college kids, you know?
Well, yeah, especially the comparison between the amateur athletes of the U.S. and whatever Russia was or the Soviet Union was putting out as an athlete in 1980. But it's neat to see that there's bipartisan support for this, including Mike Quigley from right here in Illinois was in the House, was part of the legislature, and then, just seeing in the Senate and the House. So, yeah, that's great to see. Thanks for bringing that up, Dave. And before we let you go, Ben Johnson, do you think he's going to be the Bears coach or the Raiders coach by the end of the week?
I've been seeing a lot of stuff. They're really pushing the Las Vegas really wants him, And, how do you guys feel about this fact where you got, terrific Tom as an announcer, but yet a part owner of the Raiders?
The conflict of interest with Tom Brady. I didn't hear what he said in the broadcast last night. And I know the NFL's been kind of, it's been a big story. The NFL's kind of pushing him to talk about it. But I guess my take on it was, the NFL owners approved this. The NFL approved Brady being on Fox. So it's kind of their own self-created problem. So if they're not going to police this, then it's an owner-driven league. It's their money. They're going to do whatever they want with it. And if Fox wants to pay him, I'm fine with it. Now, granted, I have a very biased opinion on this because I want to see Tom Brady succeed because I am a Raiders fan. But it is a little weird, I will say. But at the same time, like it almost in a weird, awkward way feels like when the XFL was around and Governor Ventura, who was an active governor, was announcing football games on the weekend. It just feels like that's not necessarily a conflict of interest, but someone where it's like, hey, don't you have more important things to do than being calling football games, on television? But in this regard, it's a little bit weirder because it's like, yes, it's more important to be the governor of Minnesota than it is to be a football owner. But this is, where you're going against your own product or at least manipulating your own product. So if the owners have a problem with it, they should address it. But if the owners want this to be something that's totally kosher in the world of football, then I guess that's their MO.
I think it's whatever anybody thinks. The bottom line is this. Everybody would take advantage of whatever little advantages they have. And right now, Mark Davis has Tom Brady, and Tom Brady is interested. If the Bears had somebody like TB there to be able to show off all the rings and say, this is what I could promise you, all of us would take it. And I think we've all seen here what it means to have a competent coach that can game plan, scheme, and put his players in the right position, what it means for your organization. Is it shady? Yeah. Yes. But they put themselves in that position. Both these can be true. The Raiders are taking advantage of something, a loophole that nobody else can, because how many organizations have been able to have the greatest quarterback of all time as the broadcaster of the number one team, as well as having the sway to have organizational pull. The question now becomes, though, out of dysfunctional organizations, does Ben Johnson, the hot commodity, want to go to the Chicago Bears or the Vegas Raiders? And it's something we're going to talk about in the next segment, but that is the ultimate question. It is two franchises that are huge logos, beloved in the National Football League, but are dysfunctional. So I think that is one thing. And to Dave and to the Lions, this was also a dysfunctional team. The Cincinnati Bengals were a dysfunctional team. A certain player, certain coaches, and the right moves by a front office, you could turn around this thing really fast in the National Football League.
But I think this also, just specific to the Commanders-Lions game, also proves kind of the catching fire at the right moment.
It's everything in the NFL.
The Bengals in 2021 were kind of right place, right time. We saw the Bills, how close they came certain times where it's just it didn't go their way. This might be just something like that, with the Lions just beaten up by injuries and the fact that the Commanders are turning it on just at the right time. But, will they eventually run into a better team that's going to figure them out and solve them? But I want to thank Dave. Thank you for the call. Let's kick it on over to Marver.
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple things. I don't know if I agree that Brady, the greatest of all time, is a great announcer. Olsen was a better announcer. I think he should stick to being an owner, personally. And it is a conflict, really, of interest. In terms of, yes, I do know it's the NFC North, not the Central, and the Dodgers aren't in Brooklyn anymore. But in terms of the Lions, I mean, they blew a 24-7 lead in the championship game last year, and they had such a terrific season. It's it was almost expected that they get to the NFC Championship game, but it did not happen, and so it's an extreme disappointment for Detroit, where they had, it seemed like a great shot, and there were three. Actually, Green Bay had double digits too. They had 11 wins, so the division seemed so strong, and they ended up 0-3, which was surprising. I thought that actually, Green Bay and Minnesota had a chance in the first round, but they did not. It wasn't really much in doubt. And the funny thing about the Commanders are, their doinkability got them. It clicked and went through against Tampa. Otherwise, they may not have even gotten as far as this. But 45-31 is an impressive win. 2 touchdowns, all that offense, even against a banged up Lions team. I mean, this guy Daniels is the real deal.
And I think that's the most fun for somebody like a Devin, who is a Bears fan, who does root on Washington. You get to see the growth or the ups and downs of Caleb, and now almost a shining moment for Jayden, kind of seeing a lot of ends of the spectrum. What were your thoughts of what you saw in the NFC and AFC divisional rounds?
Well, let's be real here. Everyone wants to, go and praise Jayden Daniels, but we can't forget about Brian Robinson Jr. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last night, 77 yards. I want to mention that because we have really great running backs. Great things happen. Paul knows about that when the Raiders had Josh Jake.
It was a great running back with the Raiders.
He was good. The rest of the team, not so much. But we're just definitely seeing it's so much nice to see, especially a rookie quarterback. They'd be the first rookie quarterback to actually win a Super Bowl in his rookie year, because I know everyone is always a rookie at some point in time. But definitely seeing a lot of this too. But it does, like Paul said, it gives me a lot of the RG3 thing, but with competent management that isn't going to put him out there if he's injured and force his legs to, just break off here. But again, I kind of want to go back to the Kansas City game, because as I told Paul H, I thought that was going to be the upset, because as we saw last week with the Texans taking on the Chargers, it definitely kind of seemed like the Texans are another team that turned it on at the right time, and they might be able to stop the Kansas City Chiefs. As we kind of saw this season, the Chiefs were not the Chiefs, but as Mercado likes to always say, Patrick Mahomes remembers in his playoffs, and that's when he turns it on, so to speak.
And that's all it takes, is for a great quarterback, a great team, a great coach like Andy Reid to, at the right moments, push the right buttons. And, say what you will about CJ Stroud's up and down season, the Texans defense showed up. The Texans kind of played pretty decently towards the end of the season compared to when they didn't have Nico Collins, when they lost Tank Dell. And for me, these NFC and AFC playoffs every year always reminds us how important it is stability in your organization. That it's more than just flash and pans. We see that all the time in the NFL. But if you want stable wins, if you want to be in these situations, if you want to be Kansas City or Andy Reid, where you're in a championship game every single year, you have to build the proper infrastructure. You have to have a good D-line. You have to have a good O-line. You have to have a good head coach. Your GM, your president of football operations, and your owner all have to be aligned. You're not going to win the Super Bowl every single year. But if you put yourself in a position to be competitive in your division, to get a bite at the apple, specifically in the NFL playoffs, it just takes a couple wins. It takes a break here or there. And we saw in these matchups, a win went one way, and Washington had to go to Detroit. What if Detroit had played at Tampa Bay, had played at Rams, any one of these other teams? It might have played out differently. That is the margin in the NFL. And the great teams find the wins within the margins, in the salary cap, when it comes to scouting, when it comes to drafting and hiring coaching. And that's what we need to see. If you're a Raiders fan, if you're a Bears fan, if you're a Jaguars fan, if you're a Cowboys fan, watching these playoffs. It's the constant of the great organizations that have gone through the muck to come to this side. But we want to know your thoughts. Give us a call, 773-763-9278. We're on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle live right now. So leave a comment down there. We have an email at sportscubicle@gmail.com. And of course, at SoundCloud. Check out any missed one of our interviews, conversations at soundcloud.com/WCPT820/tracks.
Hey, coming up, a Heisman Trophy winner that could coach in the NFL. We'll talk about it next on the Sports Cubicle.